The October morning breeze carried the scent of eucalyptus trees surrounding the residential neighborhood of Pasadena, while the first rays of sunlight filtered through the curtains of Davis and Associates Real Estate. It was a morning that seemed ordinary, but would become the landmark of one of the most intriguing cases in the region in recent years. Mia Davis adjusted the documents on her desk, checking for the third time the contracts she needed to review before the 10 o'clock meeting. At 32 years old, she had built a solid reputation in Pasadena's real estate market, known for her tireless dedication and ability to find the perfect home for each client. Her golden retriever, Luna, rested peacefully beside the desk, as she had done every morning for 5 years. The office itself reflected Mia's meticulous nature. Awards and certificates lined the walls, testament to her success in an industry where trust and reliability were paramount. She had started the agency 3 years earlier, after working for a larger firm where she felt constrained by corporate policies that didn't always serve her clients' best interests. Building her own practice had been challenging, but the personal satisfaction of helping families find their perfect homes made every long day worthwhile. The phone rang, interrupting the morning silence of the office. It was Sarah, her assistant, confirming that the 10 o'clock client had cancelled the meeting at the last minute. Mia sighed, looking at the packed schedule that now had an unexpected gap. She decided to use the free time to visit a property she was having trouble selling, a Victorian house on the outskirts of town that belonged to a peculiar client. The property had been on the market for 8 months, an unusually long time for Pasadena's competitive real estate environment. Despite its historical charm and prime location, potential buyers seemed to lose interest after viewing the house. Some cited the property's isolated location, while others mentioned an indefinable sense of unease they felt while touring the rooms. Mia had begun to wonder if there was something about the house that she was missing. Luna lifted her head when Mia grabbed the car keys, her golden eyes shining with expectation. "Let's go for a ride, girl," said Mia, stroking the dog's silky coat. It was routine to take her on property visits. Clients loved Luna, and her presence often helped close deals. The dog had an intuitive sense about people and places that Mia had learned to trust over the years. The drive to the property took 20 minutes through Pasadena's tree-lined streets, past well-maintained neighborhoods where children played in front yards and elderly couples tended to their gardens. The contrast became stark as they approached the Victorian house, where the suburban comfort gave way to a more isolated, almost forgotten corner of the city. The Victorian house stood imposingly at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by a garden that had seen better days. The owner, Marcus Thompson, was a reserved man in his 50s who had inherited the property from a distant aunt and was eager to sell it. What Mia didn't know was that Marcus had been living in the house for the past 6 months, unable to afford rent elsewhere after a series of financial setbacks had destroyed his credit and depleted his savings. Mia parked in the driveway and observed the house's facade. There was something melancholic about that construction, as if it held secrets within its century-old walls. The paint was peeling in places, and several shutters hung at odd angles, giving the impression of a once grand home that had fallen into neglect. Luna jumped out of the car and immediately began sniffing around the garden, her tail wagging enthusiastically, though Mia noticed the dog seemed more alert than usual. Marcus opened the door before Mia even rang the doorbell. He seemed nervous, his hands trembling slightly as he greeted her. Dark circles under his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping well, and his usually neat appearance showed signs of stress. "Thank you for coming, Mia. I know we hadn't scheduled this, but I need to talk to you about the sale." They entered the house, and Mia noticed the environment was different from the last time she had been there. There were boxes stacked in the hallway, as if Marcus was preparing for an urgent move. The furniture was covered with sheets, and the air carried a musty smell that suggested the house had been closed up for too long. Luna stayed close to Mia, quieter than usual, her ears perked up as if listening for sounds that humans couldn't detect. "I'm thinking of lowering the price again," said Marcus, leading her to the living room. His voice carried a desperate edge that made Mia uncomfortable. "I need to sell this house as quickly as possible. Money is... well, let's just say time is not on my side." Mia studied the man's face, noticing the deep dark circles and tension in his expression. She had worked with many clients facing financial difficulties, but Marcus's anxiety seemed to go beyond typical seller's stress. "Marcus, are you okay? You seem worried about something beyond the sale. If there are issues with the property that I should know about, It's better to address them up front. He hesitated for a moment, looking out the window that faced the backyard. His fingers drummed nervously against his leg, and Mia noticed his hands were shaking more pronounced now. It's complicated, Mia. There are things about this house, about my family, that I'd rather not discuss. I just need it to be sold. The sooner the better. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of Luna barking in the backyard. Through the window, Mia saw the dog digging frantically near an old oak tree, her behavior completely unlike her usual calm demeanor. The golden retriever was focused with an intensity that Mia had never witnessed before, as if she had discovered something that triggered every instinct in her body. "Sorry, I'll get her," said Mia, heading for the back door. As she walked through the house, she noticed details that hadn't registered during previous visits. There were water stains on the ceiling in several rooms, and some of the floorboards creaked ominously under her weight. The house felt different somehow, as if it were holding its breath. When she reached the backyard, Luna was completely focused on her digging, her paws working furiously to excavate the soil near the base of the massive oak tree. Dirt flew in all directions as the dog worked with single-minded determination, ignoring Mia's calls completely. It was strange. The dog had never shown this behavior before, and her intensity was almost frightening. Marcus appeared behind Mia, visibly agitated. His face had gone pale, and beads of sweat had formed on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. "Please get her away from there," he said, his voice loaded with urgency that bordered on panic. "I don't want holes in the yard. It will make the property harder to sell." Mia managed to call Luna back, but noticed the dog resisted more than normal. When she finally succeeded in pulling Luna away from the tree, the dog continued to whine and strain toward the spot, as if something there called to her on a primal level. There was something in that spot that had deeply awakened her instincts, something that spoke to the ancient partnership between dogs and humans in ways that transcended normal understanding. As they returned inside the house, Mia observed Marcus from the corner of her eye. He seemed relieved that Luna had been pulled away from the tree, but also extremely nervous, constantly glancing back toward the window that overlooked the backyard. His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic, and Mia began to feel genuinely uncomfortable about being alone with him in the isolated house. The meeting ended quickly after the incident. Marcus insisted on reducing the house price by 20%, a decision that surprised Mia. It was a significant reduction that would certainly attract buyers, but also raised serious questions about the urgency behind the sale. In her experience, such drastic price cuts usually indicated either severe financial distress or undisclosed problems with the property. When Mia and Luna left the property, it was almost noon. The sun was high, but Mia felt a strange chill running down her spine. There was something about that visit that deeply bothered her, although she couldn't identify exactly what. Luna remained agitated during the entire drive back to town, frequently looking back toward the direction of the Victorian house, as if she had left something important behind. The next morning brought an unusual silence to Davis and Associates. Sarah arrived at the office at 8 o'clock sharp, as always, but Mia's car was nowhere to be seen in the parking lot. The front door remained locked, and the lights were off. Sarah checked her phone for messages but found nothing from her boss. Sarah Martinez had worked for Mia for 2 years and had never known her to be late or miss appointments without notice. Mia was the type of person who arrived early and stayed late, often working weekends to ensure her clients received the best possible service. Her absence was so out of character that Sarah immediately felt a knot of worry forming in her stomach. By 9:30, Sarah began to worry seriously. Mia was punctual to a fault and never missed appointments without notice. She had 3 scheduled showings that morning, and the first clients were already waiting outside the office, checking their watches and looking confused. Sarah tried calling Mia's cell phone repeatedly, but each call went straight to voicemail, which was also unusual, since Mia always kept her phone charged and accessible. The first clients, a young couple looking for their first home, seemed understanding when Sarah explained that there had been an emergency. However, as the morning progressed and 2 more appointments had to be cancelled, Sarah's concern escalated to genuine alarm. She began calling local hospitals, wondering if Mia had been in an accident, but found no record of anyone matching her description. Detective Robert Chen received the missing person report at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Sarah had waited as long as she could before contacting the police, hoping Mia would appear with a reasonable explanation. But as the hours passed and clients continued to arrive for missed appointments, it became clear that something was seriously wrong. Chen was a veteran detective with 15 years of experience in missing persons cases. He had seen everything from runaway teenagers to elaborate disappearances, but something about Mia Davis's case immediately caught his attention. Successful business people didn't simply vanish without a trace, especially not with important meetings scheduled and a thriving business to maintain. The detective's methodical approach began with establishing a timeline. According to Sarah, Mia had left the office around noon the previous day, mentioning that she was going home early. Her last known location was the Victorian house owned by Marcus Thompson, where she had gone to discuss the sale. Chen made note of the property's address and decided it would be his first stop after examining Mia's apartment. The detective's first stop was Mia's apartment, a modern two-bedroom unit in a well-maintained complex near downtown Pasadena. The building manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, let him into the apartment after confirming his credentials. What Chen found inside only deepened the mystery and confirmed his growing suspicion that this was not a voluntary disappearance. The apartment was immaculate, showing no signs of struggle or hasty departure. Mia's bed was made with military precision, her coffee maker was clean and ready for the next morning's brew, and her purse sat on the kitchen counter with her wallet, credit cards, and identification still inside. The refrigerator contained fresh groceries, and there was a load of laundry in the washing machine that had been left to sour. Chen methodically searched each room, looking for clues about Mia's state of mind or plans for the previous evening. In her home office, he found a meticulously organized desk with client files arranged alphabetically. Her computer was password protected, but there were no obvious signs of distress or unusual activity. A calendar on her desk showed appointments scheduled for the next several weeks, including a vacation she had planned for the following month. The detective interviewed Mrs. Rodriguez, who had lived in the building for over a decade and knew most of the tenants personally. She described Mia as a model tenant who kept regular hours and was always friendly but private. The last time she had seen Mia was 2 evenings ago, walking Luna in the courtyard around 7 o'clock, their usual routine. She seemed normal, Mrs. Rodriguez told Chen, wringing her hands nervously. Maybe a little distracted, but nothing unusual. Luna was with her, like always. That dog never left her side. They were inseparable, those two. If something happened to Mia, Luna would never have left her willingly. Chen's next stop was the real estate office, where Sarah provided him with detailed information about Mia's schedule and client interactions. The detective learned about the cancelled 10 o'clock appointment and Mia's impromptu visit to the Victorian house owned by Marcus Thompson. Sarah also mentioned that Marcus had been calling the office frequently in recent weeks, sometimes multiple times per day, asking about potential buyers and seeming increasingly desperate to sell. "She called me around noon yesterday," Sarah explained, her voice shaking with worry as she recounted their last conversation. "She said she was going home early and would see me this morning. That was the last time I heard from her." She sounded tired, maybe a little stressed, but not alarmed or frightened. The detective asked Sarah about Mia's recent behavior, any personal problems, or unusual circumstances that might explain her disappearance. Sarah insisted that Mia had seemed fine, perhaps a bit stressed about some difficult properties and the challenges of running her own business, but nothing that would cause her to simply vanish. "She loved that dog more than anything," Sarah added, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "She would never leave Luna behind voluntarily. They went everywhere together. Something terrible must have happened to both of them." Chen decided to visit the Victorian house where Mia had last been seen. The drive through Pasadena's winding streets gave him time to consider the possibilities and develop a preliminary theory. In his experience, missing persons cases usually fell into several categories: voluntary disappearance, accident, or foul play. Given the circumstances, a successful woman with no apparent reason to disappear, leaving behind her identification and money, foul play was becoming increasingly likely. The Victorian house stood empty when Chen arrived, its windows dark and unwelcoming. He knocked on the front door repeatedly, but received no answer. The mailbox was overflowing with accumulated mail, and newspapers lay scattered on the front porch, suggesting that no one had been home for several days. Chen walked around the property, noting the overgrown garden and the general air of neglect that seemed to permeate the entire estate. In the backyard, he found something that immediately caught his attention. Near the old oak tree, there was a patch of disturbed earth, as if someone had been digging recently. The soil was loose and darker than the surrounding ground, and there were what appeared to be paw prints in the soft dirt. Chen made a mental note to return with a search warrant and proper excavation equipment. 3 weeks had passed since Mia Davis's disappearance, and Detective Chen had exhausted most conventional leads. The gas station security footage had confirmed the attendant's account. Mia had indeed stopped there after leaving the Victorian house, and she appeared distressed. Luna was visible in the passenger seat, panting heavily as if she had been agitated or frightened by something that had occurred at the property. The search warrant for Marcus Thompson's property had yielded disturbing results. The man had vanished as completely as Mia, leaving behind the Victorian house and all his possessions. His disappearance had occurred sometime between Mia's visit and Chen's arrival at the property, suggesting a direct connection between the two events. When Chen and his team excavated the area where Luna had been digging, they found nothing but old tree roots and decades-old debris. However, ground-penetrating radar had detected an anomaly deeper in the yard that would require more extensive excavation. Chen had also discovered troubling information about Marcus Thompson's background through extensive database searches and interviews with former associates. The man had a history of financial difficulties and had been involved in several questionable business dealings over the past decade. More concerning was the revelation that he had been facing foreclosure on the Victorian house. Despite telling Mia he was eager to sell it, the property was actually owned by a bank that had been pursuing legal action against Thompson for months. The detectives' investigation had expanded to include Thompson's financial records, which revealed a pattern of desperation and increasingly erratic behavior. The man owed substantial amounts to various creditors, including loan sharks who were known to use violent collection methods. He had been making increasingly desperate attempts to raise money, including several failed get-rich-quick schemes that had only deepened his financial hole. Sarah had been invaluable in providing insights into Mia's professional relationships and her interactions with Marcus Thompson. She revealed that Marcus had been pressuring Mia to find a buyer quickly, often calling the office multiple times per day with increasingly frantic demands for updates. His behavior had become increasingly erratic over the past month, and Mia had mentioned feeling uncomfortable during their interactions. She said he gave her the creeps, Sarah told Chen during one of their follow-up interviews. But Mia was professional to a fault. She never let personal feelings interfere with business. She was determined to help him sell that house, even though she was starting to suspect there were problems with the title and his legal right to sell the property. The media attention surrounding the case had intensified dramatically, with local news stations running daily updates on the search for Mia and Luna. The story had captured the public's imagination, particularly the image of a loyal dog disappearing alongside her beloved owner. Volunteers had organized extensive search parties to comb through local parks, hiking trails, and abandoned buildings, but their efforts had yielded no significant leads. Chen had also been working closely with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit to develop a psychological profile of what might have happened. The federal agents suggested that if foul play was involved, it was likely the result of a situation that had escalated beyond the perpetrator's original intentions. They theorized that Thompson might have initially planned to intimidate or threaten Mia, but the situation had spiraled out of control. One significant breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A retired postal worker contacted the police after seeing Mia's photo on the evening news. He remembered delivering several registered letters to Marcus Thompson in the weeks before the disappearance, all from legal firms and collection agencies. The man had seemed increasingly agitated with each delivery, often refusing to sign for packages and asking paranoid questions about who might be looking for him. He was paranoid beyond belief, the postal worker told Chen during their interview, always looking over his shoulder, asking if anyone had been asking about him or watching the house. The last time I saw him, maybe a week before that lady disappeared, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His hands were shaking and he kept muttering to himself. Chen decided to dig deeper into Thompson's past, working with detectives in other jurisdictions where the man had lived. What he discovered painted a disturbing picture of someone whose life had been spiraling out of control for years, leaving a trail of suspicious incidents and unresolved questions. Thompson had been involved in a similar incident 5 years earlier in Arizona, where a business partner had accused him of embezzlement and fraud. Although criminal charges were never filed due to lack of evidence, the partner had disappeared shortly after making the accusation. The case had gone cold, but Chen couldn't ignore the similarities to Mia's disappearance. Detective Robert Chen had retired from the Pasadena Police Department 5 years earlier, but the Mia Davis case had never left his mind. It remained the one investigation that haunted him, the missing piece that had prevented him from feeling complete satisfaction with his career. Now, on a quiet Tuesday morning in 2022, his phone rang with news that would finally provide the closure he had sought for a decade. The caller was Detective Maria Santos, Chen's former partner, who had taken over the cold case unit. Her voice was tense with excitement as she explained the reason for her call. "Robert, you need to get down here immediately. We found them. After all these years, we finally found them both." The discovery had come about in the most unexpected way, through a series of coincidences that seemed almost too remarkable to believe. The Victorian house that had been central to the original investigation had finally been sold after years of legal complications involving Thompson's estate and the bank's foreclosure proceedings. The new owners, a young couple named David and Jennifer Walsh, had purchased the property at a significant discount, planning to renovate it completely and restore it to its former glory. Jennifer Walsh was a landscape designer who had immediately seen potential in the overgrown backyard. She had hired a contractor to remove the old oak tree that dominated the space, planning to create a modern garden design that would complement the house's historical architecture. It was during this excavation that Luna, now an elderly golden retriever, had appeared like a ghost from the past. The dog had somehow survived in the wilderness for 10 years, living as a feral animal in the vast Angeles National Forest. Wildlife officials who examined her estimated that she had been surviving on small game, berries, and occasionally scavenged food from campers and hikers. Her appearance was dramatically changed. She was thinner. Her once golden coat was now matted and grayed with age, and she bore numerous scars from her years of survival in the wild. But Luna's instincts and loyalty had never forgotten. When the excavation began at the Victorian house, something had drawn her back to the property where her life had changed forever. She had appeared at the construction site like a specter from the past and immediately began digging frantically in the same spot where she had been digging 10 years earlier, as if she had been waiting all this time for someone to return and understand what she had been trying to tell them. The construction workers, initially annoyed by the stray dog's interference with their work, quickly realized that Luna was focused on something specific. Her behavior was so intense and purposeful that they decided to follow her lead and dig deeper in the area where she was concentrating her efforts. What they found sent shockwaves through the community and finally solved one of Pasadena's most enduring mysteries. Buried 6 feet beneath the old oak tree, they found human remains along with personal effects that were quickly identified as belonging to Mia Davis. Her real estate license, still in its protective case, had survived the decade underground. More importantly, they also found evidence that would finally solve the mystery of her disappearance and provide answers to questions that had haunted the community for 10 years. Chen arrived at the scene within an hour of Santos's call, his heart racing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The backyard was now a carefully controlled crime scene, with forensic teams methodically excavating and documenting every piece of evidence. Luna sat nearby, under the gentle care of an animal control officer, her eyes never leaving the excavation site where her owner was finally being recovered. The forensic examination revealed that Mia had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head, likely during a violent struggle. More significantly, they found a waterproof metal box buried alongside her remains that contained documents and recordings that Marcus Thompson had apparently hidden before his own disappearance, creating a time capsule of guilt and confession. The contents of the box told a complete and horrifying story of desperation, fraud, and escalating violence. Thompson had been involved in an elaborate fraud scheme, using his inherited property as collateral for loans he had no intention of repaying. When Mia had unknowingly stumbled upon evidence of his illegal activities during her visits to the house, he had panicked and made a series of increasingly desperate decisions. The recordings, made on an old cassette player, contained Thompson's rambling confessions recorded in the days following Mia's murder. He described how Mia had noticed discrepancies in the property documents and had begun asking probing questions he couldn't answer. In his paranoid state, fueled by desperation and the pressure from his creditors, he had convinced himself that she was going to expose him to the authorities and destroy his last chance at financial salvation. On that fateful morning 10 years ago, Thompson had lured Mia to the house under the pretense of discussing a significant price reduction that would attract buyers quickly. When she had arrived with Luna, he had attempted to convince her to stay quiet about the irregularities she had discovered, offering her a substantial commission if she would simply ignore what she had seen. The situation had escalated when Luna had begun digging near the tree, apparently detecting something Thompson had buried there previously, evidence of his fraudulent activities that he had hidden in the yard. In his confession, Thompson described how the confrontation had turned violent when Mia had threatened to report him to both the police and the real estate commission, which would have ended her career as well as his freedom. He had struck her with a shovel, in a moment of panic and rage, killing her instantly. Luna had tried to protect her owner, but Thompson had managed to capture the dog and transport both bodies to the remote forest location where he had planned to dispose of them permanently. However, Luna had escaped during the burial process, disappearing into the wilderness before Thompson could recapture her. The dog's survival instincts, honed by generations of breeding and her deep bond with Mia, had allowed her to adapt to life in the wild while never forgetting her loyalty to her deceased owner. Thompson's own fate was revealed in the final recordings. Consumed by guilt and paranoia, he had taken his own life in a remote cabin in the mountains, but not before burying the evidence that would eventually solve the case and bring justice for Mia Davis. The discovery brought a mixture of relief and profound sadness to the community that had never forgotten Mia Davis. Sarah, now running her own successful real estate agency, broke down in tears when she learned that her former boss had finally been found. She was trying to help him, Sarah told reporters through her tears. Even at the end, she was just trying to do the right thing. That's who Mia was, always trying to help people even when it put her in danger. Luna's survival became a symbol of loyalty and perseverance that captured international attention. Despite her advanced age and the trauma she had endured, veterinarians determined that she was in remarkably good health for a dog who had lived wild for a decade. The Walsh family, who had purchased the property where she had led investigators to Mia's remains, immediately offered to adopt her and provide her with the loving home she deserved. Chen visited Luna at the Walsh home a week after the discovery. The old dog seemed to recognize something in him, perhaps sensing his connection to Mia's case and his years of searching for answers. As he sat in the backyard where the mystery had finally been solved, Luna approached slowly and rested her grayed head on his knee, finally at peace. "You never gave up, did you, girl?" Chen whispered, stroking her weathered fur with gentle hands. "You brought her home. After all these years, you brought her home." The case officially closed with Thompson's posthumous confession and the recovery of Mia's remains. She was laid to rest in a ceremony attended by hundreds of community members who had never forgotten her story or stopped hoping for answers. Luna, now in her final years, lived peacefully with the Walsh family, finally able to rest after a decade of waiting and watching. For Chen, the resolution of the Mia Davis case provided the closure he had sought for so long. It reminded him why he had become a police officer in the first place, to seek justice for those who could no longer speak for themselves and to ensure that the truth, no matter how long it takes to emerge, eventually comes to light. The story of Mia Davis and Luna became a testament to the unbreakable bond between humans and their faithful companions, and proof that some mysteries, no matter how cold they become, are never truly forgotten, as long as there are those who refuse to give up hope. Thank you for joining us for another compelling true story. The case of Mia Davis reminds us that justice, though sometimes delayed, can still prevail through the most unexpected circumstances. Luna's decade-long vigil and ultimate return to lead investigators to the truth stands as one of the most remarkable examples of loyalty in criminal history. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us which city you're watching from and let us know what you thought about today's story. Remember, we bring you new true stories every single day, so make sure to hit that like button if this case moved you. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss our daily investigations into the most fascinating mysteries and true crime cases from around the world. Until tomorrow, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.